Can I have a spotlight, please? Thank you.
Hey, welcome to WrestleReward, the show that looks at whether the wrestle was worth the reward. Clever, right? Today's Spotlight episode looks at Drew McIntyre versus Bobby Lashley for the World Championship. No, not that one. Still no, but we are getting warmer. There we go, Bobby Lashley defending the TNA World Heavyweight Championship against Drew Galloway from the June 14th, 2016 episode of Impact Wrestling on PopTV. Make it pop! The story of how this match came to be starts a year earlier, where the reigning TNA World Champion Bobby Lashley had his second reign with the title ended by the American hero Kurt Angle on Destination America in London, England, where Kurt Angle was overcome with emotion over knowing he only had one more day to wait for an all-new episode of Mountain Monsters. Fast forward a year and Lashley once again found himself in London facing Angle, this time in what would be the final match of Kurt Angle's TNA retirement tour. Lashley defeated Angle with the spear and finally avenged his loss from 2015, but the frustration that had been building for those 12 months over not having his world title drove Lashley to get Kurt with Angle and lay out the legend, sending him out of Impact and into Jason Jordan's life with a series of spears. The first man out to help Angle was Drew Galloway, who'd actually tapped out Angle on his retirement tour a month earlier, but suffered the same fate as Angle and would apparently see things Bobby's way a couple years later.
And now Lashley in, McIntyre driving Angle to the steps!
Out next was Eddie Edwards, who tried to stop the bleeding but was dropped faster than a Davey Richards indie booking, though Edwards would get his revenge on Lashley by unseating him for the World Championship later on in the year. The final boss was Ethan Carter III, whose own history with Angle was checkered to say the least, between attacking Angle on the 2014 London tour after he already announced his injured knee would put him out of action, and EC3 pinning Kurt 1-2-3 to win his first TNA World Championship in 2015. Lashley decided that he had made his point and sauntered off into the night as TNA's new public enemy, #1. 1 week later, Lashley nearly turned right back to face by throwing down lead announcer Josh Matthews during an interview and preparing to spear him, but Josh's broadcast partner, the Pope D'Angelo De Niro, saved Lashley's heel turn by stopping that attack and eating a spear himself. Later that night, Drew Galloway cashed in his feast-or-fired briefcase for a world title shot on Matt Hardy after EC3's title match had been thrown out due to interference by Mike Bennett, where Galloway won and made the first half of history as the only person involved in both a feast-or-fired and a Money in the Bank contract cash-in. A few weeks later, Lashley smoked the Pope out by defeating him in a street fight, with a beating for the road afterwards, but where there's a post-match Lashley attack, there's an EC3 to stop it. Third time's the charm though, and Lashley finally caught Ethan Carter III sleeping when he was able to blindside the world champion Drew Galloway a week later, signaling that he was officially coming to reclaim his throne. After Drew's detour that some lived the dream of dropping a Fox News host on their head, Lashley pulled up to a local gym that Drew had dared him to fight at, and Lashley took the dare and added the physical challenge on top of it with the amazing visual of running into frame from behind and putting the world champion down. Lashley brawled with him into an MMA cage at the gym, where ironically the Bellator pro was grounded by the pro wrestler until fellow members of the TNA roster broke up the scrap. With a spear that sent Jeff Hardy off the steel stairs into the steel post, Lashley defeated Hardy and Mike Bennett in a #1 contenders match later that night and insisted that special referee Drew Galloway, who looked on the verge of tears counting 3, raise his hand. Lashley told Drew they'd face on his time, introducing us to the Lashley clock that would follow him from one world title pursuit to another. Galloway still wanted to defend the gold though, and did so against his former stablemate from 3-month faction The Rising, Eli Drake. Drew sent Eli into that good night with a claymore, only to be laid out once more by Lashley. With animosity between the two reaching a fever pitch, the call was made to add Lumberjacks to their championship showdown to maintain order, but you'll never believe it, the Lumberjacks actually ruined the match by getting into a brawl, including EC3 entering the ring to get speared by Lashley as the match was ruled a no contest, and Lashley's destiny of winning a world title in a Lumberjack match was delayed another 5 years. Dixie Carter then announced there would be a rematch where there must be a winner, which is always nice to make a stipulation of your wrestling match, but the only ways to win being via knockout or tap out. Lashley and Drew celebrated their unsullied setting by throwing down again, with the highlight of this brawl being referee Brian Stifler being speared all the way back to his mom's house by Lashley. Lashley failed to make Drew tap out at Slammiversary, but only because he knocked him out with a clubbing shot before then locking in the head and arm choke to secure his third TNA World title, setting up a rematch for 2 days later on Impact after Drew invoked his rematch clause against the advisement of EC3. The rematch and the rest of the championship matches on this partially live Gold Rush episode of Impact were almost never seen though, as this show was delayed for almost its entire duration, 1 hour and 50 minutes, due to PopTV not being able to control their control center. If it wasn't the live feed stuttering worse than 2005 Matt Morgan,
Wrestler in the wrestling business today.
Or the show briefly returning only to cut in and out with commercials,
ready to travel back to a simpler time with discos, drive-ins, and doobies.
or the dreaded color bars of death screen. It was a total non-stop loop with the same preloaded commercials that Pop had on file. One for Impact Wrestling, promoting the show that Pop was literally unable to show you. The Daytime Emmy-winning Celebrity Name Game starring TV's Craig Ferguson, and the crown jewel of Pop's daytime programming, reruns of that '70s show with the can't-miss hook of finding out just how big Donna's hands are.
I have the biggest hands in the world!
But eventually, Pop was able to master its master control, and at long last, we get to the match featuring EC3 on commentary along with Pope's best friend, Lil Pope. Drew comes out with a very backyard wrestling sounding theme song.
Drew Galloway gave everything he had. Sunday at Slammiversary. Drew Galloway.
And out comes our world champion Bobby Lashley, matching his headband to his attire like a true pro. Galloway doesn't care for the headband though and immediately tries to kick it off with the Claymore, but misses and suffers a shot to his ribs that were injured at Slammiversary. Lashley goes to rack him, but Drew knees his way out to run at Lashley, who evades him once with a leapfrog but can't escape a German that sends Lashley crashing into the ropes. After a commercial, Drew enlists the TNA Army of the Impact Zone to hold Lashley down while he chops him down to size, but after living by the rail he dies by the rail with Lashley dropping him sternum first onto one. Lashley steps across Galloway's ribcage to add injury to injury and then adds even more injury by sidewalk slamming Galloway onto the apron, which is, in my opinion, the hardest part of the ring. Drew nearly suffers a countout defeat to go with Sunday's knockout defeat, but climbs his way back up to sunset flip into the ring, but once again has his ribcage stomped on. Lashley moseys on over to commentary to taunt EC3 and make him flinch, completely punking out the self-proclaimed ass-kicking machine. Lashley gets one for EC3 flinching as Galloway re-emerges to chop Bobby, but his comeback is thwarted by getting shot into the steel ring post. Lashley returns inside to end the match with a spear, but Galloway catches him and locks in the Kimura, a clear warning shot to Brock Lesnar and a preview of coming attractions. Despite being inches away from the ropes, Lashley just stares at them instead of actually grabbing them, but eventually he does snap out of it to grab one and avoid having his own arm snapped. Lashley tries to regain control with a delayed vertical suplex, but after Impact is already delayed for 2 hours, Drew has no time for another and hits a neckbreaker instead. Drew's finally able to knock the headband off Bobby Lashley ahead of going up top and trying for a clothesline, but gets caught and put in a crossface far away from the ropes. Drew powers his way out of it by standing up and flipping Lashley over for the Undertaker's finisher, which Lashley avoids by picking the ankle and going for Kurt Angle's finisher. Galloway slips out, and though not a tombstone, does connect on a piledriver, but it's still not enough to win back the world title as Pope gives us a classic Mike Tenay line on commentary.
We have to look at that again. Keith Benson in the truck.
Galloway takes Lashley up top and in honor of TNA legend Alyssa Flash connects on a super air raid crash. Drew tries once more for the Claymore, but once more Lashley sidesteps it and does so again for a third time, causing Drew to knock out referee Brian Hebner and leave himself open for a spear. Lashley begins punishing Galloway by adding on to the count with another spear and beaming his pearly whites directly into your living room. He then grabs a steel chair to end his Galloway problem for good, but EC3's seen enough and stops it, taking down Lashley himself and grabbing the chair, but oh my god, he hit Drew! Was it on purpose or not? Question mark, question mark, question mark! Lashley takes EC3 out with a spear that was definitely on purpose and locks in the head and arm choke to squeeze the life out of Drew until referee Stifler arrives to call for the bell and award Lashley the win in a match that after looking at the rest of this card, we can safely say wins the Brockburg for best match of the night on June 14th and the best match of the morning on June 15th when it finally aired in full. Though as anyone who was watching Impact Live on this night came to know, PopTV had another show with pretty good matches too.
Okay, what comes out of the penis? The white stuff. No, the proper nerve. Proper semen, yes.
Hey, thanks for watching the Spotlight episode of WrestleReward. If you thought that was good, then get a load of these. I'm pointing at the two videos on the screen right now, but I guess you can't see that, so just use your imagination. And give me a cool tattoo while you're at it. Something sexy.